Vipariyayo mitya jnanam atadrupa pratishtam. Incorrect knowledge formed about something which is not based on its true nature is called false understanding or misconception. So once again, I'll just put up the English synonyms to the word, and we won't necessarily speak about them in any sort of detail. So this incorrect knowledge that's been spoken about here, this erroneous understanding. One example that is commonly used in the Vedas, and it's also used, I think, by Vyasa, is a very classical example in Vedic texts. And it's the idea of mistaking something for something else. And the common example that is used is a rope and a snake. And if one comes across a rope on the path home at night, and it is nearing dusk, so it's kind of quite difficult to make things out, and I see that and imagine it to be a snake, this piece of rope, what I'm doing is superimposing the form of a snake onto something that is not a snake. So even though a snake is a real thing, and rope is also a real thing, the superimposition itself affects the mind, causing a vritti, and this vritti is in reality an error. So there are unlimited ways in which this vritti can be manifest or be experienced. And once again, we won't go into much detail here, but these things will become unfolded, or we'll unpack them as we work our way through the sutras. So Vyasa, he considers error to be essentially the 5 kleshas. So this is something that's going to be I'm newly raising here, but it's something that we'll be covering quite soon as we progress. Shabda jnananupati vastu sunyo vikalpaha. Vikalpa is the conceptualization of something which arises after having heard about it, though it has no perceptible existence beyond the words used. So this term vikalpa, it is often translated by commentators as being imagination. But if we look at things a little bit more closely, we'll see that imagination is not necessarily the most accurate term to use to describe what it is that Patanjali is speaking about. So this is the third of the vrittis, or the mental states. So what is being used here? In our usage of English, for instance, I may say to somebody who's asking me can I help them with something or whatever, hang on a minute. And it's like, what does that actually mean if we unpack it? Of course, we have some sort of understanding of what we think that means, but we know that it's possible to hang on something, but can you actually take a minute, this period of time, and hang on to it, and hang from it, or hang it on anything? So what we're seeing here is there are some words that have some reality that we can relate with. But when we are looking at it, we're talking about a concept that doesn't actually exist as a real thing. But what it does is it helps us with some understanding. It is a form of knowledge or jnana. Another type of saying is, somebody's asking you again to do something, I'll find time later. This consideration of this term, to find time, or sometimes when somebody's asking someone to make room for them, can you make a space for me? We don't have the ability to find time. It doesn't exist as something like that, like a hat or an umbrella or a shoe that I can actually find and grasp and bring it to somebody else. And so when I use this type of terminology, I'm speaking about something that has some reality or some real existence that I can sort of connect with, but it does not have any reality beyond the use of the words itself. So the commentator Vyasa, he used an interesting example. He says, and we'll use the term here, the word Purusha. This Purusha meaning the seer or the living being, the Atma. He says, if I say Purusha has the character of not being created, no positive quality relating to Purusha is actually being indicated. I'm just stating that Purusha has a character of not being created. But the mere lack of a property of being created, this is something that is implied. I'm implying that the Purusha has this quality, not being created. But then he says that is why that characteristic is regarded as vikalpa, and the term is used to indicate an idea which has no existence beyond the word. So no existence beyond the word mean, can you point to something that is not created? If it's not created, it has no existence. And giving that character or quality to something is not something I can reach out to and touch or pick up or define beyond that, just that concept. And if we can see, it's quite, a lot of people get really amazed when they actually think about it. We find that mostly we think and communicate in very imprecise terms. And what we are seeing here is the precision with which Patanjali, the very meticulous way that he is analyzing and speaking about things. And he's detailing the vrittis in this way to help us understand what Purusha is. And we partially are able to do that by understanding what it is not. So when he speaks of these 5 vrittis, these states of consciousness that the mind can exist in, and the nature of the fluctuations of these vrittis and everything associated with them, when we can clearly identify those things and we know, okay, that is not the Purusha, this is not the Atma, this is something of the material nature, something which is external. So Patanjali is therefore directing very careful attention to what the mind is, so that yogis can be very clear about what the Purusha should not be identified with. So as we again progress further, I'm not spending very much time going into laborious detail, but there is a tremendous amount of knowledge attached to these different things that I'm only giving you in small bits. not wanting you to become overwhelmed and perhaps disheartened. The search for the Purusha, for self-realization, is a very noble and the most important of all undertakings, and one does not have to be excessively qualified intellectually in the way people think of intellectualism in order to be able to have these perceptions and deep understandings. So I am just going to deal with them with some brevity, but as we go through these sutras, then I'll try to weave an understanding and a good understanding to make it so that the sincere practitioner can benefit from these directions. So literally what we're seeing here, and I think in summary, for this example of vikalpa, we're learning that the mind can be recognized by what it does, that the vrittis, the different vrittis, are activities of the mind, and creating states, or manifesting rather, not creating, manifesting states of consciousness. And by understanding these, we can therefore understand what is spiritual in nature and that which is material.